What's up, everybody? My name is Ryan Thomas, and you're tuning in live on Spreaker.com, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. I have wrapped up both Part 1 and Part 2 of today's show. 15-minute clips on Spreaker.com, streamed live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, as I just mentioned. You can follow me on Twitter at Thomas Takeover. You can like the Thomas Take Sports Podcast Facebook page. You can also subscribe to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast YouTube channel. That's where all the action is. By the action, I mean the audio version of these podcasts, the visual version of these podcasts, and everything in between. Featuring some comments from people that live in their mom's basement with Cheeto dust on their fingers. And that's okay. Be who you are, I suppose. But anyway, at any rate, UFC 226 is this weekend, Saturday, July 7th. And I am pumped. I'm going to a 4th of July party, a cookout type thing. I'm going to be seeing some friends. Then later in the night, I'm going to be going to the bar, watching the fights with my friends, taking them in with some terrible food that I'm trying to avoid like the plague, but I will not. For UFC fights, I have to have the nachos, maybe some boneless wings. Yes, I said boneless, but if I'm at Buffalo Wild Wings, let's be real. There's not many safe options on the Buffalo Wild Wings menu. Not many, to say the least. Man, Buffalo Wild Wings is one of the worst establishments that is in existence in the restaurant world, whatever you want to call it. It's so bad, and yet it's so good because I can go there and eat bad food and watch the fights. So in a way, it's a catch-22. Let's talk about the subject matter, though. I'm losing focus. UFC 226. Stipe Miocic, the world heavyweight champion, the UFC world heavyweight champion, is taking on Daniel Cormier, who is the UFC light heavyweight champion. It's the first time we've seen the heavyweight and the light heavyweight champ share the octagon at one time. This is special. This is a really special fight because in combat sports history, the heavyweight and the light heavyweight divisions have kind of been blended. Never in mixed martial arts, never in the UFC. The really only time I can consider this to be a recurring circumstance in some way is Randy Couture coming out of retirement as the former light heavyweight champ. He comes out of retirement to face Tim Sylvia for the heavyweight title, beats Sylvia, and becomes the heavyweight champion as well, being the first fighter to win 2 titles in 2 different weight classes in UFC history. It's the closest I can get in my mind, my Rolodex of the sport. That's the only thing I can think of that's as close as that in this instance, comparatively to Miocic versus Cormier. And I am so excited for this fight. As we have inched closer to this fight, I'm very excited for it for a lot of different reasons. And they have everything to do with the fight. But those reasons have everything to do with the fight. But there's another reason why I'm excited for this fight. It's mainly why I love combat sports so much. As a fan, as a competitor, whether it was wrestling, boxing, whatever, the narrative entering this fight is so perfect. It is so well timed, so well planned, so well executed. It was the perfect fallback plan for both fighters. What I mean by that is Stipe Miocic is never going to get the respect he deserves. For whatever reason, he's just not. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. He's just not going to get the respect that he deserves. He's going to get scoffed at, looked down on, just never given the fair onus that he deserves. Greatest UFC heavyweight champion of all time. He's defended that belt more than any other champions before him. And that's tough in MMA. You're wearing 4-ounce gloves. You're fighting someone upwards of 290 pounds. If the fighter weighs in at 265, you really think that they're going to weigh 265 when they enter the octagon, when they weigh 265 the day before at heavyweight? Not a chance in hell. So Stipe's beating these heavyweights that are much bigger than him Alistair Overeem, physically a lot more ripped. Francis Ngannou, a machine of a human being. Knocked those guys around like rag dolls. Threw them around. Whooped them up. Beat them up. Overeem, he got dropped, but he bounced Overeem's head off the canvas like a basketball. Francis Ngannou, he punched around the ring for 25 minutes. Nobody thought he was going to do that. They either thought Ngannou was going to knock him out like he did versus Overeem, or Miocic would maybe submit him, but the fact that he beat him over 25 minutes, I found that to be more impressive than it would have had he finished Ngannou earlier, because we got to see just how talented this guy is. And he is very talented, to say the least. Definitely belongs to be, under the distinction. Deserves to be under the distinction that he is the baddest man on the planet. Then you have Daniel Cormier, who has won every single fight, but technically won on his record, which dates back a couple years back, but did fight John Jones last year, lost, but obviously that fight was ruled a no contest due to the fact that John Jones is John Jones. So Daniel Cormier has everything to benefit from this fight. Stipe Miocic has everything to benefit from this fight. Oftentimes, the super fights in MMA history have not really been at the benefit of both fighters. I can look at, a super fight that definitely had the benefit of both fighters in a way. Well, I really can't say any other fight has had the benefit of both fighters. BJ Penn fighting GSP at welterweight. For the real first super fight, it was welterweight versus lightweight champion super fight. GSP's lightweight title was on the line, and GSP was much bigger than BJ Penn. BJ Penn was decent sized, but was a natural lightweight, actually a natural featherweight, which is the division that he fought in. Once that division was brought in place in the UFC, and BJ's career was kind of far past and far gone. But GSP used his will, his inferior size, just manhandled him in the second fight. Made BJ quit in the fourth round. First fight, BJ Penn cracked GSP, broke his nose. Other super fights in years past, Eddie Alvarez and Conor McGregor, that didn't really benefit Eddie Alvarez. Eddie Alvarez was taking a huge chance taking on Conor McGregor. That was a benefit to Conor McGregor only, giving him that fight versus Eddie Alvarez. And, there's been some along the way that, I can't really consider. Bisping, GSP, that was the benefit of both fighters. Bisping was going to make a lot of money. GSP was getting a crack at a belt that he never thought he'd have a crack at. And they were the main event, and it was Madison Square Garden. That event was so fantastic. But there's never been a fight really narratively where both fighters, champion versus champion, or a super fight where it's benefited both guys. Maybe along the way, if we get Mighty Mouse versus Dillashaw, that could be the case. Maybe if that fight happens, which I don't know if it ever will. But Miocic, often scoffed at. DC, often looked down upon as not the real champion. Meanwhile, he's got a belt that says he is. That's very tough. When people are saying you're not the champ, John's the champ, but John took himself out of the UFC again, took himself out of commission, took himself from active to suspended, took himself from jail. This guy is not a redeeming human being, and this is not somebody that I'd say should be considered a role model to anyone in John Jones. DC, on the other hand, I would say, highly redeeming guy, role model-esque guy, but really, what does that matter? At the end of the day, I want to see who's better at punching each other in the face. I don't care if these guys are great people. I really don't. I don't want them to be, killers and serial killers and terrible, obviously, but I don't really need the narrative that they're great people. I can go without it. I like a little bit of a heel. When John Jones is set to fight Daniel Cormier after this huge suspension. He says, I beat you after a weekend of doing cocaine. Everybody cheered. Daniel Cormier asks everyone, why did they cheer? Well, Daniel, they don't care if he's a bad guy. They know that he's the rightful champ. That's got to be very hard for DC to handle. It has to be. He does all the right things, all the right way, commentates for the UFC, Fox Sports, all of it. Meanwhile, he carries the company torch very well inside the octagon. He's one of the best heavyweights turned light heavyweights of all time. That's another dynamic to this fight that people don't realize. Cormier was 13-0 as a MMA heavyweight. Entered into that Strikeforce Grand Prix tournament back in the day as an alternate after Alistair Overeem, oddly enough, was injured. And Cormier steps in, 5'10", 240 pounds, to take on 6'4", 280-pound Bigfoot Silva. He knocked Bigfoot Silva out. He slammed Josh Barnett on his head. He won the Grand Prix tournament. That's Daniel Cormier's legacy right there. A guy that really came out of nowhere, joined the game very late. As he enters age 40, has the chance to become the second simultaneous UFC champion in UFC history. Meanwhile, Stipe Miocic dusts off Junior Dos Santos, dusts off Alistair Overeem, dusts off Francis Ngannou. Holy shit. What a fight. What a fight that this is going to be. I really think that this fight is actually being under-promoted somehow. They deem it the super fight, but I haven't seen as much promotion on this as I would like, and I'm big on that. I'm big on promotion. I'm big on fight hype. It's one of the main reasons why I love combat sports. I love the fact that they hype these fights up. I love the fact that they have the interviews. I love the fact they have these pre-fight interviews and things like that. That's what we need in all sports. We need to get hyped for these events because that's what brings in the people. We have a lot of great other fights on this card. Max Holloway, Brian Ortega. I haven't really dived into that one yet, and I definitely will on the Thomas Take YouTube channel as well. But, maybe that one won't be audio. But at the end of the day, Miocic has everything to gain, really nothing to lose. If he loses, he loses his title, but he's still the top contender. He'll probably get an immediate title shot. He's won more heavyweight title fights than anybody. And then you have Daniel Cormier. If he loses, he'll just go back down to 205. If he wins, he's the champ. That's the definition of a super fight. Fight that everyone wants to see, featuring two guys that everyone knows, featuring two guys that win or lose. They have nothing to lose if they lose, and they have everything to gain if they win. It's more than just a super fight. It's the super fight. That is the definition of a super fight. I do have Miocic winning. If I were to pick, I would say Miocic has the best shot. I think his size versus Cormier is something to behold. Not necessarily because DC can't beat up bigger guys. I'm not saying that. But his ability to move laterally for his size. You watch when Alistair Overeem knocked him out. He evaded the punches very well. I don't know if DC will have a chance to knock out Miocic. I don't know if he has the power to knock out Miocic. Or is Miocic's chin just that damn tough? I mean, he took hard shots from Overeem. He took extremely hard shots from Ngannou. And I wondered if Stipe Miocic had iron in his chin. I mean, this guy is on another level. He really is, and that's why he's the champ. Brian Thomas, everybody, that was my take on UFC 226, Miocic versus Cormier. Stipe Miocic, the UFC heavyweight champ, will be taking on UFC light heavyweight champ Daniel Cormier July 7th, live on pay-per-view, 10 in the East, 7 in the West. Very excited for this one, to say the least. And Max Holloway, Brian Ortega, I'm going to be diving into that a little bit this weekend. This week, probably Thursday. So, thank you so much for joining me. Please feel free to give me a follow on Twitter at Thomas Takeover. Please feel free to like my Thomas Take Sports Podcast Facebook page. Plenty of content